of the year, January, and it is the Murrieta Friends of the Library book group meeting. And our book for this month is Island of Sea Women, and it's to be presented by Chris Armstrong.
Yes. And my hope is that everyone enjoyed the book at least a little bit. I know I really did. And I'm going to start out just by giving you just a little bit of background about Lisa C. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe that this group has read something by Lisa C. in the past. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, yeah. And as a group, you've read her too.
Yes.
Okay. So you're fairly familiar with her. She was actually born in Paris, but grew up in LA. She lived with her mother, but spent a lot of time with her dad's family in Chinatown. She's 1/8 Chinese and a national best-selling and New York Times notable book, national best-selling author. I have this kind of 6 degrees of separation Kevin Bacon thing, I think. I worked for a while for the press enterprise in their marketing department. And one of the things I did for them was special events. And one of the things they asked me to do was create a book fair for them. Never had done one before. I certainly had never done one before. So I went to the LA Times Festival of Books and checked that out and decided to pattern my book fair after that. And when I was there, I was wandering around and, some of the authors have their tables and present their books. And I was wandering around and this wonderful woman said, "Don't be afraid, come over and talk to an author." So I went over and it was Carolyn C., who is Lisa C.'s mother. Oh. And she's a charming and wonderful woman, did a lot of writing for many times I'd seen articles in the LA Times literary section from her. And I had asked her if she would come to our book fair. She had just written a book called The Handyman. And it was an opportunity for her to present it. So very long story short, that did not wind up happening because her love of her life wound up passing away shortly before that. But it was through Carolyn C. that I was looking at books online and noticed Lisa C. And that's how I came to know Lisa C. So I kind of feel this special connection, and I've read a couple of her books, but this one was especially special to me because I got so caught up in the cultural part of it. And basically it's a story of friendship and forgiveness. It takes place on Jeju Island off the southern coast of Korea, centers around the friendship of Young Suk and Mi Ja, and covers 70 years of their life. During this time, they bond closely and share life experiences. The book introduces us to the fascinating world of the Henyo, female free drivers that harvest the sea and are the family breadwinners. The story is about how the bonds of their friendship are impacted by socio-political events, the role of the men in their lives, and by natural passage of time. The importance of family bonds and their shamanic religion are included as well. And I know when I first started reading the book and one of the first passages described the latrine, I thought, oh, wow, isn't everyone in the book club going to be happy with me? Well, then I realized there was some practicality to that, and we all got past that and kept reading. And then long about the middle of the book, we all read about the Bukchon massacre. And I thought, oh, I'm sure you found it very, very difficult reading. In spite of that, I really did enjoy the spin that the book put on this chapter in history. I also, as I said, I was immediately taken by the story of the Henyo. I had never heard of them before. I was fascinated by them. I continue to be fascinated by them. And have got some links. If you haven't gone to Lisa C.'s website and seen the part of her website that's devoted to the Island of Sea Women, she has several links to more information about the Henyo. And if you are at all interested, they are absolutely fascinating looks into that culture, which again, the whole matrifocal part of it interested me as well. But I am really, really interested in hearing more about what everyone else felt about the book. And so the discussion questions that I sent were just my questions. I know there are millions of them out there, but they all seemed so ponderous and heavy that I kind of shortened them up a bit. So if anyone wants to have a go at either, any of the questions or telling us all what you thought of the book, I'd love to hear it.
Who wants to go first? I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead.
I loved it. I thought it was great. And I had a friend that had read it and told me a little bit about it. And so I was really interested in reading it. And I mean, it was difficult to get through the chapter about the incident, the April 3rd incident. I happened to be reading it like last Wednesday, I think. And I was already very emotional, or no, it was Thursday, I guess, after the Capitol thing. I was already very emotional and I just burst into tears. It was very hard to get through, but I did. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I looked at the questions. I couldn't answer all of them, but I tried to answer some. The first one, what character did you relate to the most? Was June Lee, the young daughter that moved away and continued even when her mother refused to speak to her, and she moved to Los Angeles with her husband and everything and had a child and all, and she continued sending pictures and all that and letters throughout the years. And I could not understand her mother not speaking to her. I just couldn't understand that at all. And I was hoping, I liked the way it ended, but I was hoping there would be another chapter after that so that you could kind of see maybe what happened between her and Mija, her friend, because the granddaughter had her listen to Mija talking, but you never really get to see her and Mija together talking when she finally decides, when she finally hears her story. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's just fascinating. It's a fascinating book, the culture, and I'd love to learn more about the Hayenyo women. I mean,
There is a video that if you follow one of, I tried to put together a list of links, but I found that I couldn't do direct links easily. It was all through another source, and that I found that the information on Lisa C's website was the best resource. There is one video on there. It's about Henyo as mothers, and it's a very current one, and it was actually done by Patagonia clothing company, and it's about this young woman who is not Asian, but she is a free diver and was interested in the whole matriarchal society there, and she dives with them, and then they just show her chatting with the Henyo, and it's like, wow, it was just fascinating. And they talk about being a mom and being a Henyo at the same time. Really good.
What really amazed me was how even when they were pregnant, they would continue to dive, and they would have their morning sickness, throw up off the side of the boat, and then it just didn't seem to faze them. They just kept right on going,
Right. And even their diving uniforms were made so that the sides opened, so that as their bellies got bigger, they could accommodate the growing baby. Pretty tough women. Yeah.
Very tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kathy, when what you were talking about, your favorite character at the end of the book, and this was about the, forgiveness, she never did forgive her.
No.
She collected, that kind of disappointed me at the end, because she collected all the letters, and then at the end she wasn't reading them, and that was it. And she never forgave them or forgave Mija or her daughter. She didn't read her letters.
Well, she did open the letters. I don't know that poor one couldn't read, but I think when she saw the rubbings and that she really did to come to some sense of overwhelming guilt
Yeah.
and regret. But I also did read on one of the stories about Lisa C. is that she does not plan a sequel to the book. So Kathy, we'll just have to wonder.
Well,
I missed that. Lisa C. what?
Is not planning to write a sequel to the book.
Oh, yeah.
Ladies, would you excuse me? I'll be back. I've got a painter at the front door who should have showed yesterday. He's outside. I'll be back when I can. Sorry.
Well, I'll talk. Oh, are you going to talk, Ann?
Go
I'll let
ahead.
you go first.
Okay, well, the only reason I'm talking is because I'm probably the only one who did not like the book. And I'll tell you why. When I got to the point, which is probably what you're referring to, the guy's head being shut up like a watermelon and the baby, I have had so much bad happen to me this year that I thought, I'm not going to do this. And just between Chris and Chris, I thought that the first half of the book was very sophomoric. The writing was not good. Now, you all probably don't agree with me, but I didn't like it at all. I love her books, but I did not like this one. So I stopped reading when they were about 24, and it was probably a great book, but I quit. So there. I didn't answer the questions. So I'll let you guys.
That's completely and perfectly understandable. It was really, really difficult. And in one of the interviews with Lisa C., she kind of addressed that. And
did she?
that she knew it was horrible, but felt some obligation or responsibility to not gloss over it. And I'm sure that those several stories, unfortunately, were just, the very tiny, tiny tip of the iceberg of what happened to people. But I agree
Yeah.
with Chris, and I thought about that. I thought, well, I bet there will be a lot of us who just close the book and say, well, maybe next month we'll smile.
Well, I thought too that it would just continue to be bad news because World War II was on the horizon, and I thought I can't do this, so I didn't. Sorry.
No reason to be sorry.
I thought that was a very difficult section with that massacre. There were a number of difficult sections. About her writing, something I know, I mostly loved the book. I did not like having to read the violence, but it was part of the story. And most of the book, I thought the writing was great. It gripped me. And every now and then it would seem to lag. So this may be some of what Chris Draheim was talking about. Every now and then it seemed to lag, and I'd read a few more pages and it would pick up again. And I was interested in it. The thing about that massacre scene, forgiveness was such a huge part of what that book was about. And you have that as a question. And I think Chris Armstrong's question, do you think anything can be forgiven eventually? I think the answer is yes, but I think it's not always easy. And I want to give one example from our current life. The people who stormed our Capitol trying to kill lawmakers, killed one policeman, trampled one of their own. I thought that was one of the worst things I've seen in the United States in my lifetime. But to
You go lie down. Go lie
what?
down.
Okay, what I wanted to say about it, to have lived through this last couple of weeks and not have seen that, not have paid any attention to it, I think would be missing a whole major point about our history and about where we are right now, and about the hate that is dominating some people in the country. And so I think anything can be forgiven, but I think it's going to be difficult with what happened at the Capitol 2 weeks ago. So I just wanted to share that thought.
Well, I thought it was interesting, the Japanese colonization of Korea. I really didn't know the extent that they were there. I thought maybe they had just marched through on their way to Manchuria. When was that? 1938, I think, 39, something like that. I didn't realize that they did as much building and made as much military forts and stations in Korea. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I'm curious, why did the Koreans call the Japanese cloven hoofed?
Because
Chris,
they just hated each other.
But what's the significance of cloven?
I
Isn't that
think,
how?
but the devil, I think, many times is referred to as being cloven hoofed. And that at least that was my interpretation, but I'd be interested to hear if anyone else.
I think so too. I think so too.
devil, yeah. In regards to the 4/3 incident, unfortunately, I read that part at night, and I had nightmares all night, going over that part of it. But I will say I've read 4 of her books, and each one of them has violence in it, but this was by far the most violent of any of her previous books. But on a nice note, I enjoyed the book. I love her writing. I've been a fan of hers for a long time. And the book for me was an escape to another country, another culture. And I just really enjoyed it.
Wasn't it interesting there? I guess you could almost call it an obsession with marriage, getting married. That was really foremost in their thoughts. And then when they had children, they were planning, the marriage of their children, and they had the shaman that helped. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But they were really obsessed with getting married.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting how even before they were married, when the girls came back from Vladivostok, is that how you say that?
Yeah.
How they bought presents for their husbands, and they hadn't really had husbands yet. They bought a camera, and then one bought quilts. I just thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, especially since they were the ones that ultimately were the breadwinners of the family. And yet, for what, they couldn't own land, and they really didn't have a whole lot of other rights. But I agree with you. That was just very fascinating, this kind of deference to the men. At the same time, the references to how they would get together and gossip about the men in their lives and about their marriages. I thought, wow, that was really interesting, and that some things don't change. I mean, I guess when women get together, we're a strong group and we have common roots. And I was fascinated by that as well.
I love the rubbings, the way they did the rubbings, the 2 women together.
Yes.
I thought that was so interesting because they couldn't read or write, and that was their way of remembering things. And Mi Jung had her father's book that she would do the rubbings in. I like that.
I think it's amazing that they could look back at the rubbings and it would bring the same memory to both of them, because I've seen some rubbings from when I was like a teenager or something, and after a while they all look the same. A bunch of marks on paper, but years later they knew exactly what each one was. I thought that was very interesting.
Really. And the rubbings were really how Young Suk really found out about her daughter's death. because she said one of the rubbings was one of her daughter's tombstone.
Mhm.
So, yeah, they were pretty important.
Yes.
I did like the story. It's a history I've never heard about before. I've heard about the Hainial women, but I've never heard the history of that island. And it really did upset me, like it upset all of you, that the inhumanity to people that went on still bothers me right now. And I finished the book a while ago, but I have to agree with Chris. I think it dragged a lot in places, her writing, but I was just fascinated by the history, the story of it, and the resiliency of people. I'm amazed at it, but I was also kind of disappointed that even though they were strong women, they still were not strong in sense of the society there, because the men still had all the say, and they still had to follow a lot of those rules where the man was supposedly the leader of whatever the situation. But I think silently when they went into, I don't know how you pronounce that, Bultiok, whatever,
Yes.
they were laughing at the men because they really were the ones that were in charge. So so in that respect, I did enjoy it, and I appreciate that you recommended it, Chris, because I did enjoy it. I've never read any of her books, but I intend now to try to read some more.
Yeah, and you know, looking back on it, I am understanding where folks thought it was kind of dragging, because one thing that I noticed, and it was kind of a conundrum, was that when I really enjoy a book, it usually doesn't take me a long time to read it because I am so captivated by it. I was captivated by this book, but it still took me I don't know if any of you experienced this, it took me a long time to read it. And I mean, certainly it's not that long of a book, but that's probably an indication of exactly what you've been saying, that there were parts where it kind of slowed down. Several parts I had to read twice, I will tell you that, including the ending.
Well, the print was small and was tedious.
Yes, the print
Yes.
was
Yeah.
small. I wish I'd downloaded it on my Kindle. It would have been easier to read, I think.
Did anyone listen to it as an audiobook?
I did. I listened to all of my books because I don't read very well. And maybe that always think that possibly it's the reader's fault, because the girls sounded awfully young. But again, I only got until they were about 24 or something like that, and I stopped reading. But maybe it was the audio. I don't know.
Well, they were awfully young at the beginning. And then
Yeah,
through their life, they were pretty young.
yeah.
I read some interesting things about the island of Jeju and currently, and I just couldn't help myself. I mean, it has modernized. They went to growing tangerines, and I thought, really, tangerines, this volcanic island, and all of a sudden everybody's growing tangerines, but they did. But what I did is I couldn't help myself. I went on to Airbnb to see if there were any Airbnbs on the island, and there are. I found 4 of them. So, yeah, 4 Airbnbs. And tourism is becoming a big industry there. And the Henyo have helped contribute to that. And they were encouraged to help contribute to that. And one of the things that happened, and they kind of allude to it in the book, is that they all became part of, instead of just little village collectives, they became part of larger collectives, and they were basically, of course, owned and operated by men. So just
I thought that was fascinating because
ironic.
their business and their job, and yet it was men that ran their collective.
But the video showing them, as I say, sitting around and chatting, and they dive with their earrings on. And in one of the videos, there's a woman putting on her makeup powder because she knows she's going to be filmed. It's just captivating. I loved it.
Well, I read somewhere that they think in about 15 years there
Yes.
won't be any more. Can you?
Exactly.
So I hope they got some good video of them and some good oral history of it to keep it alive in their libraries and what have you.
Well, you
Yeah.
can go to this website, Anne. It's that there's videos on the web, on her website.
Yeah, I didn't go to that. I will now. I wrote it down to do that.
It has a video of them diving, and it has the tangerine, how they were dyeing the cloth. And everything.
Persimmon.
Yeah,
Persimmon.
really.
I downloaded a map of Jeju City and Jeju Island, and it was all in Korean. And of course, I couldn't read it, but I'm scrolling around looking at all the streets and everything, and I came across a 7-Eleven.
Oh, wow.
I thought that must not translate into Korean.
Probably not.
Did that study by the scientist, Dr. Park, I guess was one of them, was that a real thing? I mean, I didn't really understand its point in the story.
You know, I really have to say, I don't know if anyone discovered if it was real or not. I don't know. But I think it was just the beginning as children and sons got more educated and were going off the mainland. Others were learning about this fascinating culture. And so it just kind of came to the attention of this particular set of men, or of scientists, not men, but scientists.
Scientific
It was
study.
real.
I think that was for real because her acknowledgments, I always glance at the author's acknowledgments. In this book, I really recommend it because they're very, she goes into stories about why she's acknowledging each source that she had. But there were scientists who came and studied the women and found out the differences in their temperature, and just their physiology was different from other women who didn't have those experiences.
Sure.
It was important too in the story because that's when her daughter became so interested in science and everything. You know, she was helping Dr. Parker or whatever his name was. And that was sort of the beginning of her daughter sort of not becoming a part of the Haenyeo culture. You know, she was going to go away to college and she got all these awards for school and everything. So
Yes.
That was true about Dr. Park. It was in the back of the book,
Yeah,
telling about her research, and it was written up in American Scientific and other people who did studies on it.
One of the things that I wished I had been able to experience, but then if you watch the videos, you do, is the sound of the Sumbasori, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's my attempt at it, that the women make when they come out of the water, how it was described as almost like a dolphin or whatever. In one of the videos, and it might be the one done by Patagonia Clothing, you actually hear a woman coming out of the water and the sound she is making. And that really kind of put the parentheses around it for me because I was really wanting to hear that.
you know, I was looking up some of the words. I didn't know what they meant. Like when the mother drowned and she was talking about her ball tech or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I didn't know what that was. And I was wishing there was like a glossary in the book, but I went on Wikipedia and I looked it up and there was a whole bunch of stuff about Haenyos and it had sounds on it also.
Yeah.
So.
What was that?
My dog ball.
Oh.
When I get on Zoom, he thinks that it's his time to pick it up and throw it.
Oh,
That's what he does.
It is. It's his time.
Right.
Either that or he comes and breathes on me, one or the other.
wanting attention.
Oh, I'm very glad I'm very, very glad to hear your comments and everybody's opinion. I think it was a fascinating book to read for a lot of reasons, and a difficult, very difficult book to read as well. But I appreciate your comments.
You had one of your questions was Mija's actions. How do you justify? What do you think of Mija's actions? And I'm just curious what everybody else thought about it. You know, you really can't predict how people will react under circumstances, but then her supposed explanation of why she didn't, because she wanted to save Du Young's children. I don't know if I believe that or not. You know, I had kind of had a hard time with that part of it, but I might be wrong. How did anybody else react to that?
I think from living with a man who beat her on a very regular basis, I think that colored her whole life. She didn't want to discuss that, I don't think, with Sung Yuk, even when they were very close to each other. The beatings, it sounds like they were pretty terrible. And what she says at the end is, through the granddaughter, is that she didn't want to bring more people into that household where they would get beaten also. So which is worse?
I got that part. Yeah, I got that part and I understood that. I'm not sure that was to me the whole story of it. You know what I mean? I think it was a piece of it.
It seems to me that she almost felt like she had to choose between her son, her child, and Young Suk's son. And that was just my opinion, is that she didn't want to do anything to endanger her son. And I'm not even sure how he would have been endangered, but that there were some repercussions that might come to him because she had shown that act of kindness.
Well, he beat the son as well.
Correct.
So if he was also, and she said that he put her, after that incident, she ended up in the hospital after he beat her. So if somebody's abusing you that bad that you're ending up in the hospital, the last thing you would want to do is take in somebody else's child, because all you would be doing is exposing them to that abuse, you know.
Right.
And she wouldn't have left him, you know. That was just not a thing that women did, I guess, in that culture. I mean, I wouldn't stick around, but she, you know, for her it was unthinkable to leave him.
Well, I think her whole background of being the daughter of a Japanese collaborator kind of colored her whole self-image too. And the beatings, again, were horrible. And I know that her friend Young Suk encouraged her to divorce her husband, but she didn't feel she could, because then she would have yet another stigma against her. She would be the daughter of a collaborator as well as a divorced woman. And there was reference in there that Mija had considered suicide. She just felt that she couldn't because of her son. So complicated.
Did it ever mention what religion these folks are?
Well, when Mija and her family, her son and Young Suk's daughter went to the United States, they were Christian, they were Catholic. Growing up, the two religions on the island were either Confucianism, which in the book it said was kind of very male-centered, or shamanism, which was very female-centered. So their religion was basically shamanism, and they had this goddess culture, and they would have the shaman come in and try to have, you know, spirits speak through people. So shamanism for one, and that was another huge departure between the two best friends.
On your question, number 6, about the significance of Mija's granddaughter's Clara's name, I must have missed that. What was the significance?
Well, That was the character in Heidi.
Maybe, yeah.
Heidi was so important. And the other interesting thing is that Lisa C has a sister. And do you know what her sister's name is?
Clara.
But in the book, I'm sure it was Heidi. She didn't write it for her sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting to me, the complete fascination with Switzerland. And that once people did travel and get passports, many of them had been to Switzerland. I was surprised by that.
They were fascinated by Switzerland.
Right.
Well, when they allowed women to read, they needed books for the women to read. And somebody ordered huge shipments of Heidi because I think they thought it was not going to be non-controversial and a girl story that the girls would enjoy. But it really took off.
Did it ever say how far, when they went for water work to Russia? How far was Jeju to Russia? I mean, how many hours or?
It wasn't close. I was looking at a map as well, and I'm embarrassed to say my sense of geography of that part of the world is not good. But it wasn't a quick trip, and it just surprised me that there was anything they could dive for icy waters in the winter. And who thought, yeah, I have a good idea. We could make some extra money going to Vladivostok in winter. That it just seemed insane to me, but they made lots of money doing it. And I'm sorry, Eileen, I don't know. My sense was that it wasn't close.
Somebody needs to mute their station. I wonder if that's Leslie Ann. We're getting a lot of chatter from something.
She cast her deciding work.
Oh,
It's the painter.
Who's talking? Oh, I see Roberta's name is down there, black box, but she's not on yet.
No, she's muted.
But new vice president sworn in.
What are the things that, you also asked Chris was about, how the news got around and, how which I thought was interesting, because they had the two contrasting newspapers that came out. They had the gossip that went around the island, so the women just passed it around the island, which I like. But I also, felt that sense of false news.
yes,
Also
exactly.
sent around.
Exactly. Because they couldn't
They
read.
didn't really know where they were half the time.
Right. I agree with you completely. They couldn't read, so anything they heard was being
Well, expectations are very high, and I'm sure.
I think that the women, the hyena,
Aileen, can you mute Leslie?
were the ones that had the true news as far as life every day. But I don't know if they ever really were prepared for what happened and what was brought to their villages, because they didn't really have a sense of collective news that was really going on around them, which I think is part of why they were so shocked when things happened, because they really didn't know, other than the directives that came down, what was happening. I think that was just a very, if indeed a lot of people lived through it, a very, very scary time, an unbelievable time.
I am going to leave this.
I don't know if I want to hire that painter.
Leslie needed to mute. I'll email her and tell her if she.
Well, maybe you can call her, because I don't think she's going to read her email when she's talking.
Yeah,
But,
she needs to mute.
yeah. Roberta's laughing in the background.
Probably.
I probably wouldn't answer if I called her.
Daleen, all of us, and then when we each want to talk individually, then we unmute ourselves. But there's a way you can do that. My teacher does that.
Or we could each mute ourselves
Sorry,
too.
what did you say, Kathy?
You can mute all of us, or we can each mute ourselves. And if you want to talk.
Let me see if I can.
I have an iPad, so I get regular text.
I muted myself because my son called. He's in Florida. I thought it was important.
Oh,
Yeah.
finally. Leslie, when you
Got-
leave to talk to
I-
somebody, be sure and mute because we could hear your conversation.
Oh, he's inside and I will do that. I'm going to excuse myself. I've got this man out here painting our front door. Should have shown up yesterday, but because of the wind, he's not there. So I will see you all in a bit, certainly next month.
Yesterday.
Bye.
Bye.
Happened where I could not send the text, and then I couldn't get out and no one was calling me where I could.
It's really windy out there now. Wow.
Finally, I don't know whether I pushed the right button or whether
That noise.
yeah. And then today, my book club has a Zoom meeting, and I couldn't get in. I can see them, I can hear them and everything, but I cannot get in. And that's never happened before.
Well, it isn't coming from me. I just tried that.
What the hell is going on?
Aileen, can you mute all of us and then let us unmute ourselves when we want to talk, like Kathy was saying?
Well, I'm looking for it and I see the participants, but I don't see where I can mute you all, you know.
It's going to be with extra features.
Well,
I don't know.
Pause. Has
I like it myself, but it's not for everybody, and it can be frustrating.
I think Roberta might be the one that's stopped.
Oh, do you see Roberta's name down here? I guess she's still.
I see it. I see it
It's down there
twice.
Her name's there twice, once muted and once not muted.
Yeah, sometimes when you have two, when you're open twice, you get that kind of an echo. So she needs to shut one of them down.
When you open what, you get an echo?
She's on Zoom twice there, and sometimes you get like an echo like that if you have two of the same meeting open at the same time.
Oh, okay. I see a mute here for, okay, it must be Roberta then. It's that noise is coming from.
It's possible.
Okay, I just muted that box. Yeah. I should have done that with Leslie. I'm sorry. I'll learn.
Did any of you find the sayings, the aphorisms in the book kind of interesting too?
Yeah.
Every time I thought I'd heard a good one, there'd be another one. There were just so many of them. I put a few examples. If you plant red beans, you will harvest red beans. But I think what Lisa C, from what I read in her talking about the book, was that her favorite one was the one about the sea. And I did not write it down. I wrote down all my favorites, but she did say something about the sea is eternal. I'm sorry, I apologize. One of the funny ones I was just looking at is it's better to be born a cow than a woman. That was one of their sayings, and certainly understandable. certainly understandable. And now I'm embarrassed that I didn't write down the one that was Lisa C's favorite. I'm sorry.
Was the one that when you dive, you have a coffin on your back? Was that one?
Something like that, yes. I
What was that?
apologize.
I'm sorry.
Never mind.
When you dive, you have a coffin on your back?
That
Right.
might be it. I think it was something like the sea is better than a mother.
Because the sea is always with you. The
I
sea
think
is
it was that.
it's better than a mother because the sea is eternal.
That's it.
Yes.
Thank you, Anne.
A mother dies, but the sea is always there.
There you
or
go.
Something.
Again, I apologize for not having that right there. It was interesting to me too that the sea seemed to be sort of like a refuge for them as well. That young Suk, when she was feeling very, very upset about Mija or her children and husband and sister-in-law being murdered, she could somehow set that aside completely when she was diving. And there's certainly a lot to pay attention to down there, but it was described as just being on a different planet or being in a different world. So you could kind of see how that would be almost like balm if your mind is in pain or racing. I still don't think I'm going to try to be a Henya though. As fascinated as I am. I was taking a walk this morning
No.
and we were going kind of on an incline and I thought, wow, this is really for real.
You know, at the first of it, well, they had those flimsy little, outfits on that they put in and held their breath. And then in the videos, it showed the divers and now they've got.
Yes, gosh, it's amazing.
Interesting thing that was common to the Henyo and in all the videos and what I've read about them is as they grow older, they all become very loud. They speak very loudly because of what the impact of water pressure has had on their ears. So they're known for being loud.
Interesting.
Well, and they were always talking loudly when they came out of the water.
Just to know that there are decent, good people out there. That's so refreshing now.
Okay, it's gone.
I've never heard that sound on a Zoom meeting before.
Because she's got two open at the same time.
Do you hear that a lot when you're teaching, Lynn?
When I first started using Zoom, I did because it was my fault most of the time. and I had to learn that. But a couple of my students and ended up having, correcting that because they were doing it as well. But yeah, it's a common mistake because you think you're not connected, so you try again, but you forget to shut yourself out of the first one that you tried. That's why when I said I'm going to log off, I actually shut down and then came back on again because I didn't want to do that to you guys. Yeah. It's okay. Technology is not, well, it's not my forte. I just have to deal with it most of the time.
It's not mine anymore. That was my career. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I think that was interesting that as they progressed and they were talking about technology and they still clung to the old traditions, but they wore the wetsuits because they were required. They wore the better goggles, they wore things, but they still, kind of went back to the old ways because those were the ones that they felt most comfortable with, and could understand them better, I guess. But the thing about the television just cracked me up, I think. You know,
Yeah.
she bought the
Watching
television as
Gunsmoke.
her family and then said, I don't know why I did it.
Yeah.
And
To
then
me,
they,
it's kind of like us.
they called the goggles big eyes.
Right, big eye.
Yeah,
Big eyes. Yeah.
right.
I thought it was funny when they talked about the men, and everyone knows that men can't lift heavy things because they have weak knees. There was a part where because they were talking about them lifting the nets with all the stuff and all that, you know, to take to the market, and then, oh, they all know men have weak knees, so they can't do this work. And the men were sitting around thinking big thoughts all day.
Yeah.
That's why I was thinking there. When they were together, they were laughing at the men because they were really the most in control
Right.
of it. But
There was a
But
New York
think about
Times
it,
article about the Henyo, and it talked about how the economic independence that really came from that really helped to kick up the divorce rate, and that Jeju Island has one of the highest divorce rates in South Korea.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's not that surprising. And it also said that, and I wondered how the women, the two main characters, would have felt about this if they, back when they were diving, that now the government pays for their wetsuit and subsidizes their medical and accident insurance. So they've come a long way, baby. They really are. They're a Bultiox, and again, I'm probably not saying that right. They're government financed and now equipped with heated floors and hot water showers.
Oh,
right.
that's some improvement.
You bet.
Well, I think they did that too because it was the main attraction for that island.
You're
And it
right.
was making the island a lot of money, and the government had to do that in order to perpetuate that tourism and everything. And
You're right.
give
It
something
probably
back
wasn't.
along the way.
Probably wasn't in just because they wanted. It wasn't in the best interests of the women. Probably not. But you're right. It was a financial motivation for the government, which is sad but not uncommon.
I wonder if the divorces were because the husband was chosen for them and they didn't choose their own husband.
Yeah,
That would do it for me.
Happy.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Did anybody, were you surprised about the grandmother, young Stuke's grandmother who made the arrangements for the marriage and had the knowledge behind her of why, you know, of putting Mija with her husband, and had that knowledge about that, what had happened? I didn't expect that, to be honest with you. I mean, I knew that she was not a favorite of hers. Mija was not a favorite of hers, but to be that cruel, I just thought, wow, I was surprised.
I agree.
I agree.
Anyway, my screen keeps changing, but it's changing for the better. Now I only see 6 squares.
Yeah.
And that's my husband in the
I think,
background.
Roberta signed off.
Ah,
Yeah, Roberta went off.
yeah.
I guess she couldn't get her computer to work. So, well, it was a really interesting book and I really enjoyed it. And I have 4 of Lisa's books if anybody wants to borrow any of her other books.
Daylene, I have what you emailed me earlier, and before we close out, Marcia, I guess, had sent you comments. And if I can share those with you too. Marcia says, I was amazed at the women of the Henyo culture and how war history was a big influence on their lives. I enjoyed the YouTube about the women on the island of Jeju. I can see why the population of the Henyo has been reduced. What is most amazing is the cold they were able to withstand. Regarding the questions, I will comment on number 4. Matrifocal was a new word for me. That's a good question, whether they had their independence. I would say it was a good working relationship, with the exception it bred alcoholism in the male population. It seemed like they worked so hard with imminent danger, but they were proud of earning the living and not raising the children, so to speak. I think the men must have done a decent job with the children. The women did enjoy the camaraderie of their diver friends, and they seemed happy. I was amazed that they were not very competitive. If the men had been allowed to dive, the family dynamics would have changed. And she says, I put Lisa C. and Amy Tan in the same genre, and I must say I enjoy C's books more. I have read 4 of hers, and my favorite is Shanghai Girls and Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. Sorry to have missed today. Those are Marcia's comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for suggesting this book.
You are very welcome.
Yes.
Very welcome.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you so much
Good.
for all your research on it.
Well,
Yeah,
you're
very
welcome.
good presentation. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, I guess if anything, do we have anything else or?
I'm good. I'm happy.
Well, let me just, being Leslie isn't here, our next book is Leslie's book, Magic Lessons. This is what it looks like, and it's a big book. And, but
What's the print, Daleen? Is the print teeny tiny?
no, the print's bigger.
Good.
No, it's good print.
Good, good.
So that's our next book for next month.